Hundreds of men packed into tight steel hulls, small warships surrounded by fuel, ammunition, and the constant threat of death. They sailed in the most exposed positions of the fleet, under relentless fire during the largest naval battles in history. Their duty, to shield the fleet's most precious vessels at any cost. They were placed directly in harm's way, and they knew they'd be the first to be hit. This is the story of the World War II destroyers, and of the sailors who lived, fought, and died aboard them. When World War I ended in 1918, the United States Navy stood as the largest in the world, with nearly 500,000 sailors guarding the seas. The war had proven that naval power decided empires, and the U.S. wanted to remain ready for whatever storm might follow. But peace soon brought complacency. Nations turned inward, weary of war. Military budgets were cut, shipbuilding slowed, and for a time, the oceans fell quiet. Yet beneath the surface, tensions brewed. In the Pacific, Japan was preparing for something vast, constructing a new breed of warship known as the Fubuki-class destroyer. These vessels were faster, more powerful, and more advanced than anything afloat. Their creation sent shockwaves through naval circles. American designers and admirals knew they had to respond, or be left behind. By 1941, on the eve of a new global conflict, the United States approved an ambitious shipbuilding program, and from it emerged a revolutionary class of destroyers, the Fletcher class. Designed from the keel up to challenge Japan's finest, they were the result of every hard lesson the Navy had learned. Fast, heavily armed, and above all, easy to mass produce, they would soon become the backbone of the U.S. fleet. To understand the peril they faced, one must first understand the anatomy of a naval fleet. It wasn't simply a collection of ships, it was a living organism. At its heart stood the aircraft carriers, massive floating airfields that projected power across oceans. Whoever commanded the skies commanded the sea. But carriers were slow, immense, and vulnerable. Around them formed layers of steel protection, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Battleships were the heavyweights, armored fortresses bristling with giant guns. Cruisers scouted ahead, striking at medium-range threats. And then there were the destroyers, the smallest warships, yet perhaps the most vital. Fast, agile, and fearless, they guarded the fleet like watchful sentinels. Their mission: defend against submarines, aircraft, and sudden attacks. Destroyers laid smokescreens to shield the fleet, jammed enemy signals, and hunted unseen foes lurking beneath the waves. They charged ahead into danger, always moving, always exposed. When the alarm sounded, they were the first to respond, and often the first to fall. While carriers launched aircraft and battleships thundered from afar, destroyers fought up close, firing torpedoes, rescuing downed pilots, and chasing submarines through the depths. They bore the brunt of every assault so that others might survive. Carriers won the headlines, battleships earned the glory, but destroyers took the hits no one else could afford to take. For the men who served aboard these ships, surviving battle was only the beginning. Life on a destroyer was a constant struggle, a battle against exhaustion, the elements, and the endless uncertainty of war. But before we explore their daily ordeal, and one of the most horrific battles they ever faced, we must first understand what a Fletcher-class destroyer truly was. At roughly 380 feet long and weighing nearly 2,900 tons when fully loaded, it was the largest and most advanced destroyer the United States had ever sent to sea. A floating fortress of steel and firepower, it carried more weapons, more ammunition, and more cutting-edge technology than any destroyer before it. Its main battery consisted of 5 5-inch guns, each mounted in its own rotating turret, 2 forward, 3 aft. These were dual-purpose weapons, capable of blasting both enemy ships and aircraft from the sky. Each gun could unleash up to 18 rounds per minute, striking targets more than 17,000 yards away. But what truly set the Fletcher apart wasn't just its firepower, it was its eyes. These ships were the first U.S. destroyers built from the keel up with radar. One system swept the seas for enemy ships up to 12 miles away. Another scanned the skies for incoming aircraft, detecting them as far as 45 miles out. And the most precise of all, the fire control radar, could lock onto and destroy targets even through fog, darkness, or smoke. To handle this torrent of new information, the Navy introduced something entirely new: the Combat Information Center, or CIC. This room became the destroyer's brain. Inside, sailors huddled around glowing screens, tracking threats, directing gunfire, and coordinating attacks, often while chaos raged outside. But the destroyer's guns were only part of its arsenal. At midship sat 2 sets of torpedo launchers, 10 long tubes stretching across the deck. Each torpedo, over 20 feet in length, carried enough explosive force to tear open the hull of a battleship. Fired in a fan-shaped spread beneath the waves, even a single hit could cripple a ship many times the Fletcher's size. To guard against aerial attacks, the destroyer bristled with 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft guns, forming a deadly web of fire that could shred incoming planes before they reached the fleet. And for the unseen enemies lurking below, the Fletcher was ready too. At the stern were depth charge racks and K-gun launchers, weapons that hurled explosive barrels into the sea, detonating at preset depths to create devastating underwater shock waves. A single blast could rupture a submarine's hull or drive it to the surface where the destroyer's guns would finish the job. The Fletcher-class destroyer was more than a ship. It was a living weapon, fast, relentless, and built to survive the deadliest battles ever fought at sea. Surviving a sea battle was only part of the ordeal. What happened between those moments, in the heat, noise, and claustrophobia below deck, was its own kind of torment. Aboard a Fletcher-class destroyer, nearly 300 men lived shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by steel, sweat, and the unrelenting motion of the sea. There was no privacy, no silence, and never any true safety, not from the ocean, nor from the ship itself. In rough weather, massive waves crashed over the deck with terrifying force. Sailors gripped ropes stretched from bow to stern just to stay aboard, but sometimes even that wasn't enough. One moment a man could be running to his battle station, the next he'd vanish into the roaring dark. No one could be saved. A captain couldn't risk turning back in a storm, and searching the churning waters was futile. The crew would simply carry on, haunted by the emptiness left behind. Below decks, life was no easier. Men slept in thin canvas bunks, stacked 4 high, barely an arm's width apart. In heavy seas, food slid from trays, pipes burst, and the smell of fuel and sweat filled every corner. Even veteran sailors fell ill as the ship pitched and rolled through endless waves. And there was the constant, unspoken fear: fire. Everything aboard was flammable: fuel, ammunition, oil, and explosives packed tightly beside the men themselves. One spark, one stray shell, could turn the ship into a floating inferno. In those lower compartments, escape was nearly impossible. When fire broke out, some never made it out alive. The aftermath of such disasters remains among the most haunting images of the war, and not for the faint-hearted. Serving on a destroyer meant danger every second of every day. The sea, the ship, and the enemy all could kill you, and yet, out of this constant peril came one of the most astonishing acts of courage in naval history. It unfolded during the Battle off Samar, a small but legendary chapter of the larger Battle of Leyte Gulf, the greatest naval confrontation of World War II. Off the coast of the Philippines, the U.S. Navy was driving to reclaim the islands from Japanese control. At the heart of this operation was a lightly defended group known as Taffy 3, 6 slow escort carriers, 3 Fletcher-class destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. These ships were never meant to face heavy combat. They were built to support troops on land, not stand against battleships. But on the morning of October 25, 1944, fate had other plans. At 6:45 a.m., lookouts spotted a sight that froze every man in place. The Japanese center force, 23 ships strong. Among them, 4 battleships, including the Yamato, the largest and most powerful battleship ever built. 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. They had slipped through a gap in the American lines and were now charging straight toward Taffy 3. The Americans were hopelessly outgunned. The Japanese main batteries, monstrous 18-inch guns, could obliterate a carrier with a single shot. And the Americans? Their largest guns were the 5-inch cannons mounted on their destroyers. No battleships, no cruisers, just destroyers. And only 3 of them stood between the enemy and the American carriers. There was no chance to run, no time to hesitate. Their orders were simple: protect the carriers at all costs. At 7:06, the USS Johnston, commanded by Commander Ernest E. Evans, broke formation and charged toward the enemy at full speed, without waiting for permission. Evans ordered a torpedo run, launching 10 torpedoes at the Japanese cruiser Kumano, blowing off her bow in a direct hit. But as the Johnston closed in, the enemy struck back. The destroyer was hit repeatedly, including by 3 massive 14-inch shells from the battleship Congo. The blasts ripped through the hull, disabling the engine room and destroying the aft guns. Still, the Johnston fought on. Evans turned his ship's remaining guns on Japanese destroyers, hammering targets even as his own ship was being torn apart. By 9:45, with the engines failing and casualties mounting, Evans gave the order to abandon ship. The Johnston slipped beneath the waves at 10:10 a.m. Of her 327 crewmen, 186 were lost, including Commander Evans himself, who would later receive the Medal of Honor for his heroism. Next came the USS Hole. At 7:10, she laid down a thick smokescreen to shield the carriers, then unleashed a full spread of torpedoes toward the battleships Yamato and Haruna. None struck home, but the act drew Japanese fire away from the defenseless carriers. The Hole was pounded mercilessly. More than 50 direct hits tore through her hull. Even as she burned and began to sink, her guns kept firing. At 8:30, a final shell hit the engine room. The ship went down moments later, taking 252 men with her. Only 86 survived. Now, only 1 Fletcher-class destroyer remained, the USS Heermann. She darted through walls of enemy fire, launching torpedoes at Haruna and scoring hits on multiple cruisers. At one point, she even charged directly across the bow of the Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, a sight that few lived to tell. Though heavily damaged and flooded, Heermann fought until the very end, shielding the retreating carriers behind her. But the fight was far from over. The escort carriers themselves were now under air and artillery attack. Gambier Bay was struck repeatedly and sank at 8:20. Later that morning, St. Lo was hit by a kamikaze and became the first major U.S. ship sunk by such an attack. Yet, against all odds, the Japanese suddenly began to withdraw. Confused by the destroyer's ferocity, Admiral Kurita believed he had stumbled into a trap, that American battleships must be nearby. At 9:25 a.m., the Japanese fleet turned away. It was one of the most extraordinary retreats in naval history. 3 battered destroyers, hopelessly outgunned, outnumbered, and destined to die, had bluffed an entire armada into retreat. Their courage saved the American carriers and changed the outcome of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The Heermann was the only Fletcher-class destroyer of Taffy 3 to survive that day. Her decks were shattered, her hull flooded, but her spirit remained unbroken. Only 8 of her crew were lost. 3 ships, 300 lives, one impossible stand that echoed through history. If you want to hear more untold stories like this one, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and share it with others who love history. Your support helps us bring the past back to life.